This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm so excited. This is our third panel discussion since we've begun this series on well-being. Welcome Amanda, Kristen, and Marlo to this discussion of self-leadership today. Let's open up before we dive into questions with some introductions. So we'll go alphabetical order. How does that sound? Just like the school teacher in me, even though I never really taught school except during COVID. Amanda, would you like to go first? Just introduce yourself a little bit about your background and share how you came to have such a passion for supporting leadership journeys.
Absolutely, Adrian and Tom. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Amanda Norris, and I am the president and chief growth facilitator at Sustainable Mental Wellness. Sustainable Mental Wellness is an organization that is aiming to heal the planet and its people, one revitalized mind at a time. And so my career background really encompasses a wide variety of paths. I have my master's degree in clinical counseling and worked as an outpatient therapist for many years. I also have a background in behavioral health business development, career growth, working in staffing firms and interviewing, and also working quite a bit with different cultural groups, specifically the Spanish-speaking groups, in both a clinical and a business background. So through my multiple years of clinical work, I actually recognized the capacity for people to burn out and for the challenges within organizations when you did not have strong management or strong leadership. And so part of my aim, especially post-COVID, has been to give back to helpers and healers. And really, all of us are helpers and healers, even if we work in that corporate world, to provide them psychology-based tools that are also merged with ancient techniques, at the same time keeping a green mind or a sustainable mind with all of the things that we do. Let's not get a bunch of extra stuff. Use the tools that we have. Let's not reinvent the wheel and really feed into our people on an individual basis, on a small group basis, and really on a global basis.
Thank you. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Kristen?
I'm Kristen Lamar. I have Kristen Lamar Designing You Inc., which is also what I work my brand under is Kristen Lamar Inspires. I do a couple of things, but one of the things that my work is based on is personal professional development centered in leadership because, people go to work, as you guys have heard me say, Tom and Adrian. And thank you for having me today. Truly, again, it's a second round and it's so good to see you guys. But anyway, as you know, I work in a capacity of higher consciousness, self-awareness, that personal development is the key to all success. And then what sits behind that is metaphysics. So when we have all these components together, our whole self going to work, our whole self living, our whole self working in that capacity to be elevated individuals, then we kind of have greater success in all areas of our lives. So that's the core of my work.
Welcome. And Marlo, I should have done reverse because you're probably always at the bottom, aren't you? I was looking at your last name and your first name, and I thought, oh, I could have done the reverse alpha.
It's okay. I'm used to it. The good thing about going last is you get to hear all the good juicy bits and take lots of notes on everybody. So my name is Marlo Weingart. I am the Chief Merrymaker and Strategist for Humane Resourcing, where we are seeking to put the humanity back into human capital. And so essentially, it's kind of the culmination of over 25 years of experience in growing teams. I was the managing partner for the largest yoga center in South Florida and that was under my leadership. We started off tiny and grew to the largest um, yoga and meditation center, and we have had metaphysical speakers from all over the world. They still have a worldwide recognition for that level of speakers. And I was a classroom educator, and I was also an instructional coach for a couple districts. I worked with English as a second language populations, which was kind of a game changer for me in terms of inclusivity and recognizing different learning styles, and how the experience of people who are not familiar with how things are done, and how to make them feel part of and feel included and belonging sort of became um, the centerpiece of everything that has driven me. I started building teams when I was at the ripe old age of 6 years old. So I'm an only child. I have always worked to create fun groups and great teams around me. I am an ICF, or International Coaching Federation certified ACC coach. I have my master's in organizational leadership. I'm looking at doing my doctorate in psychology, and my goal, my life's work, the driving factor for me is groups and how to create that awesome synergy that is always there. It's just a question of figuring out how to get that right mix and bring it together. And it relies on each person bringing their best piece. And so leaders are so key to that, and so often overlooked, because everyone has leadership abilities.
Thank you. Are you ready, Tom? Because this is a powerhouse, right?
There's
here.
a lot of things running through my mind, and we have to take it one question at a time. And the first one that comes to mind for me, we've been hearing a lot about burnout, and we learned from one of our guests that it recently became officially a designation. We've known about it long before that at the World Health Organization, with its own codes for treatment and stuff. And Amanda, we'll start with you, because you had talked about revitalizing one mind at a time. So the question I have, and going all the way to societal, which is consistent with what we're talking about: individual, team, organizational, and societal. So let's zoom into an individual who becomes aware that burnout is a reality in their life. Where do you begin?
Oh, Tom, that's such a great question. Thank you for asking me. I have a workshop that I provide as part of professional development for a wide variety of organizations. It's called Boundaries, Burnout, and Everything in Between. And so, on the individual level, sometimes we might be blind to the fact that we are burnt out. We've been going so long in this same mode, just through the grind. And so I really like what Marlo said about groups having to come together, even though we have the necessity to be autonomous in our own decisions and taking control of our own lives. Sometimes we need that feedback from the outside to come in and say, "Hey, Amanda, you look like you're struggling right now." So your question in being, what do you do first? Man, I think you really have to figure out, where do you stop the bleed? When we talk about burnout, there's so much more behind that. Even though WHO has determined, yes, it could be a medical diagnosis, isn't necessarily just one source of burnout. So it's taking stock and going through piece by piece, what are those factors that are contributing, and then externally finding the support, whether that looks like physical activities, clinical psychology support, coaching, having a friend, making adjustments, or even some of that future planning so that we can feel set up. So I think it's hard to say, where do we start? It's kind of
Well,
a, how do we stop and Stop
Yeah,
it.
I think you did. So the starting point is owning it and being aware. Kind of like recovery. We admitted we had a problem because we often say, "Oh, it's no big deal, I'm on vacation a month from now or whatever." We keep pushing on. And so I think awareness is first, and then you talk about, then once you're aware, you come to believe that you can get help, and then help appears in all sorts of directions. So thank you for that. And maybe we go right down the line and just address burnout. Marlo,
Oh,
any thoughts?
yes, absolutely. uh, Thank you for asking, and I agree, it's a great question. It's definitely, I'm thrilled that it has an official recognition, and I think Adrian and I had talked about this at some point. I had read an article about on NPR about burnout like 3 years ago. It was right around COVID, and it said that um, that up until COVID, people, the viewpoint on burnout was that you were somehow flawed. You had dropped the ball, and you were not taking care of yourself, and during COVID, professionals, because I mean, the numbers were insane during COVID. All kinds of research data and analysts came up and said, actually, no, it's about um, a whole system has failed you if you have burnout. And how can your work and your colleagues and your support system help you not get burned out? Or, as Amanda pointed out, how can you be provided with the resources to support you so that you show up as your best self and that your work supports you in that? So going right along with that, I love the name of that workshop. It sounds fantastic. I want to take it. And it goes along with a leadership plan that me and a colleague have put together that we call the 100-year leadership plan. And it's based on, I love to read, I'm a huge reader. It's based on several articles that I read with centenarians. And they kept asking them, what's the key? And I read it in a variety of very well recognized sources. And they said, what's the key to all these different centenarians from all over the world? And they all kept saying the same three things. And it said that you have to have a good physical plan. You have to take care of yourself physically. You have to have a good emotional plan. You have to have a support system. And you have to have a spiritual plan. And so that's what our 100-year leadership theory or plan is based on. We call those the 3 pillars, but we changed it slightly, and it's physical support, emotional nourishment, and spiritual enlightenment. And that if we all have those things in place, we have a much better chance of not getting burned out. And if our work and our colleagues and our friends and family all have that in place, and they can kind of go, oh, it looks like second pillar, you're kind of dropping the ball there. You have a much better chance of avoiding burnout, which is really ideal. Not to go into burnout and then down the toilet, but
So we're
to not
building
even go
nicely. So
there.
we become aware, and then we look at the foundation that's not supporting us rather than dealing with the symptoms. And that just rolls right into Kristen's work. And so, Kristen, take it away, because
Indeed, it does.
it's your sweet spot.
Here's, based on what you two have said, I would echo all of it and then add, this is where self-leadership comes in. So the thing with that is that, yes, there are external forces that burden, and they're all different, like Amanda said. So there's root causes everywhere, but it's that self-awareness or self-leadership of self to identify at a higher level. That's what we're missing. So burnout can be avoided. There is a tool for it. It's called Be Aware. There's a tool for it. It's called, be observant of self, right?
Yeah.
So when we elevate our thinking or our consciousness, what we're talking about, self-leadership, right? Or wellness, I come before everybody. That's not narcissistic. That is actually saying that my well-being is my number one priority. So when I reach a level of burnout, or I'm feeling fatigued, or things start to feel, if we don't pay attention to how we feel, is a better way to say it, then we don't realize we're already down the slippery slope. If we make our focus on how we feel every day, we catch things faster. So as far as being a self-leader or self-aware person, you have to be self-aware, an observer of self, and then you have to tell yourself the truth. So that's honesty. So self-honesty. So we miss self-honesty for the reasons you guys are saying, because it's external. And it's where we feel steamrolled right into something, but we never set up our personal foundation for leading ourselves to greatness. That's where it starts. It can all be avoided. If we talked about this in companies, if we talked about this in society, if we talked about this in organizations, we are responsible for how we feel and what we do with how we feel. And our culture says drive, 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 do, 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 do. We have the wrong programming. So it all starts with you leading you. And then what are those beliefs? And we can get into all that at another point, but that's my piggyback to expand that a little bit more.
Where do you see in the work that the three of you have respectively done with leaders, where do you see people get hung up? At what point in that are there hangups? Sounds like a great prescription. So how come it's not working?
I
think-
personally, oh, go ahead, Marlo. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that Tom mentioned this at some point, I think in the introduction, about reactivity versus responsibility. And
Yeah.
we're all kind of a victim of our frame of reference and how we grew up, and the environmental and all the different stressors that come into play, and learning how to overcome those is really key to making the right choice between reactivity and responsibility. And then there's like halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If I'm any of those three, you're liable to get punched in the nose when I'm and so, but otherwise I'm like totally in control and totally fine. So, self-awareness, as Kristen mentioned, and then also just again, that self-awareness piece that, oh my gosh, I need to da 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 da.
Yeah. And two, I would think it's beliefs too. So we talk about a lot of how people believe and think. And so a leader, again, self-leadership. So a leader going into something may think they're an amazing leader and handling everything because they've maybe been set up that way, or they've got a promotion, or they have all these credentials, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're hitting the mark of what leadership is, right? So it's that self-leadership first, self-awareness. Personal development is key, and it's consistent and continuous. You never let that go. And then it's also in mentoring the greatness out of other people. You cannot mentor the greatness out of other people if you can't even be aware of if you're actually telling yourself the truth about your leadership. And the interesting thing about leadership and how this affects other people, because we often see leaders who don't really care about how other people experience them. That's a problem, right? That creates a lack of safety. That creates more stress and pandemonium down the chain, right? So we need leaders to really care about how people experience them. We need leaders to care that they're never going to be perfect, they're never going to get it done, and they're always going to be working on themselves, and how can they lead themselves and others better. That's a number one thing. And then it avoids, I shouldn't say it avoids all these other things, because everybody comes to the party, so to speak, wearing their outfit or personality of choice, right? But at the same time, leaders can play with that better because they have created a self-awareness level, a self-observation. And by the way, how you experience me is important to me, and how I see you is important to me. So I give you the right guidance so that I'm responsible for my community inside my company. I think that's highly missing.
Mhm.
I really love what both of you said there. It makes me think about like a leader who's just going off the tracks or doesn't recognize where they are. And so in order to be an effective leader, we have to model through self-regulation. If we pause and think about school and what we're trying to teach our children or our future adults in this world, it's all about self-regulation, classroom management. How are we keeping it together, staying at the desk, or just learning how to do our day in and day out tasks? So what gives us cause to then in some of these leadership positions say, well, I'm just going to roll with how I think it's appropriate to roll. But if you're not taking a pause to regulate along with that self-awareness, your behaviors, your attitude, fostering a positive culture within your company, it's going to then take some sort of response from HR or negative feedback or employees departing the business, hopefully for someone to pause and then say, maybe I'm acting out of line. Things are starting to get difficult. I need to make a change. But it has to get bad enough for them to be motivated to then make that change in their regulation.
Well, I
What
think
else,
as
Kylie? Go
I
ahead, Tim.
hear, oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody.
It was me. I was just going to say, all of this does tie into burnout too. We can't leave that aside. Like burnout, these are all the side effects, right? These are all the
Mhm.
causes, I should say, or root causes, and then burnout is the side effect. So far, we have a plethora of things that contribute to this situation that's occurring in our society. And then we haven't even talked about family responsibility. We're just
Mhm.
talking right now about work and leading yourself.
Well, we have a panel that is passionate about putting the humanity first, but we're making a very strong business case because what we're saying is that we focus on driving, 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 doing, doing, doing. But when we get burnout at any sort of scale, we aren't doing anything, and we're certainly not doing it well, and we're losing our people. And there's a tendency to throw slogans at it and say, bring your whole self to work. But there's no strategy for that. There's no reinforcement for that. So my question, and we'll just roll as we roll. I won't call on someone particularly, starting with self-leadership and then creating environments with the people closest to us first before we roll it out to whole organizations. How can we create environments where there's room to talk about, think about, and respond in new ways? Starting as local as can be, and then Amanda, you got the whole globe, but just really the self-leadership, and then who do I impact? And it might be 3 or 4 people, it might be family, close friends. How do we create culture and nurture that this matters?
I'm always reading. I think we're pretty clear. The 10 happiest countries, I'm sure everybody's seen that, comes out every year, and it's always the Nordic countries, and all the studies are based on that the way they build their society is based on the group. All their activities are based on their community and the group. They bring their families into the community and the group. When they get home, they don't plop down in front of the TV. They go out, they interact with others, they support others in their community and in their groups. It's not that the individual is irrelevant, it's that the group and the community is the focus. And if we take a page from them, and year after year after year after year, they're always the happiest countries. countries, then that has to be significant.
I love that. Countries, the countries. It's so true, though. It's so true.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I
You're
don't know
up,
if
Kristen.
I don't know if there's much to add other than, you know, a community setting. So when I work with companies, my mission is to transform teams into communities for that very reason. Communities are far more open, willing. There's less arrogance in a community mindset. Not saying that it doesn't exist, but I'm saying as a community mindset or a consciousness that you share, you really are all showing up to support one another, the community you live in, the church you go to, whatever the case may be. And my example of that, and I know Tom and Adrian, you guys have heard this, is, what a community does is like when a tornado rips through the town, everybody comes out with their skill set to clean it up. Everybody comes out to help each other. If the lights aren't on across the street, but they're on your side, you invite people over for a meal. Like that's community. I remember I had a cesarean with one of my kids, and my neighbor knew that I was home alone and my husband was gone, and they came over with, you know, mowers, and they mowed the grass, and they did all these things, and they come over with food. That's community. So my idea of teams is very separate. Teams do things to reach a commonality at the end, but they still compete independently. That's still happening. So when we can have a greater resource outside of us that has a community mindset, that we're going to all win, and I don't even like the word win, we're all going to collaborate together for this harmonious, joyful, peaceful outcome, that also weans out the people that aren't of that consciousness, and they end up leaving the community till they expand. Or better yet, they expand in the community and they become better people. That's what I hear you saying. That's what I hear you saying, Marlo, about countries that are achieving this are achieving it from that. Maybe they don't realize it, maybe they do, but that's the metaphysics that sits behind that, because we expand in a greater capacity. Now, the other caveat to that is it could go the other way, because there are cult communities too, and it's not for the higher consciousness. But you can tell by the way it feels. If it feels really freeing and really good and really exciting, and you want to go for all the right reasons for the experience and the joy of it, then you're pretty much on like the right track. If it's something that you feel manipulated, or it feels icky or sticky or anything like that, that's not a community. If it has any venom or violence or rules or regulations of dominance, that's not what we're talking about. And I think that's important to speak to that, because it's in every country. It's what are you attracted to, and how does it feel when you participate in it?
The master said it this way when he was asked, they're going to do evil in my name, how will we know? And he said, you will know by the fruit.
Yeah.
So if it's bearing, it might be a community, but if the fruit is toxic, then we got to re-examine the values of the community.
Yeah.
This topic is really making me take pause and think about part of the actual toolkit that we provide to teams and to work within our workshops, and specifically trying to have a strong stake in restorative practices. So when Marlo's talking about the power of the group, when Kristen's talking about developing safety within groups, restorative practices and even circle practice, where all members are coming in at a common level, is a very, very strong tool that has really been starting to take weight. And it is an ancient modality from indigenous tribes originally. So this is being infused within our school systems. This is being infused within corporations and companies as an alternative to punitive or disciplinary measures. It is the fostering and building of community by bringing together people from different places and spaces and asking the key questions and building up that level of trust. And I don't think that we can have a strong company or a strong culture unless we know through trust that we can be safe in that place. And so if organizations are looking for, hey, what's the path? What do we do? Strongly considering a restorative leadership style or a restorative path to discussions. Adrian, I heard your last podcast. You said, ask your people, just ask your people. And this is the tool to do that. Get the people in the circle.
Yeah, I'm pretty
That was a
passionate
good
about just
Adrian
talk to your
impression.
people, right? Like, why do we not get this?
Yeah, good question.
It's
Why
true.
do we
Adrian,
not get it? Like, you're
tell us
sitting
your thoughts. Go ahead.
wondering what people think, right? But, well, so what was coming to mind as you were all explaining this was that language matters,
Mhm.
because visualize community very differently than we do team. A team is put together for a function, right? To achieve something. But a community is put together or comes together. I don't even know if it's put together. It comes together. I think it's more organic to support. And I think those are the key differences. And so if I'm thinking of the highest level executives at a company, we want them using the language that reflects how they really want their employees, to use your word, Kristen, to experience work at that company, right? And it also comes back to the self-leadership of, you have to recognize how you, like you said, again, Kristen, how do you want, as an individual, how do you want to be experienced? And if there's not alignment and we can't connect a community to the work we do, what does that say for our culture? How is that going to show up in the culture, right? Because now it's tasks that are being driven down. And those are teams and those are work. So it feels, I hate to say it, because this is not simple. Simple is never simple. But it feels like if you really take a step back and you see an organization is not being experienced the way you envision it, stop and think about what you're saying and how you're saying it and the language you're using. And could it be as easy as using better words?
To that point, I love that. So I'll segue to this. We use culture, company culture, company culture. Forget company culture. Why aren't we talking about company consciousness?
Mm,
Like, we need company consciousness.
mhm.
You know, we need companies to care about the consciousness of not only the people who set up the companies, who lead the companies, who lead other people. We need them to care about the consciousness in which they provide their level of expertise, skills, whatever, and then how they train that down into the company. So when I work with leaders, if I'm not working directly with the top brass and maybe just underneath, and sometimes I am, and it's a mixed bag, but the point is, I talk to them about this shift of teams into communities. And so one leader at a time, they adopt the idea and their teams are turning into communities. So we're shifting the consciousness of a handful of people. Now, I'm not working with every single person. I'm not working with every leader. I'm not working with shared ownership, maybe one owner and not the other, but that's enough. That's 3 or 4 people. So the company is shifting whether everybody likes it or not, and it's shifting for the better because people have decided that their consciousness is more important for everyone to experience greater effects. And the funny thing about all this too, and I'll end it here so I don't dominate because you guys know I could go on forever, but is that high performance and performing highly are 2 very different things. This is a consciousness that companies need to adopt. And the reason why is you can be a high performer. So think the Obamas, that puts it in perspective. That's high performance people, right? Getting things done, going, 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 going. An owner might be that way, right? But they might have a staff full of people who perform highly given tasks. given certain things. And they might excel as a high performer, but we really have more people that just perform highly at certain things and not that high performance drive. It's very, very different. And we have to lead with that consciousness so that we get the results that also doesn't induce burnout. That's a thing. That's a
And
real thing.
I feel like that leads into the idea of, which we talked about, knowing yourself, noticing things. So instead of, not that there's anything, I'm a huge fan of lifelong learning, but if I don't have X and Amanda does, then she needs to be on my team. And if I don't, and et cetera. And recognizing that none of us are perfect. None of us bring everything that's needed to make it all work. We absolutely need to accept that we are not alone and that we cannot function by ourselves. And that goes through all 3 stages of my leadership plan. You've got to take care of yourself. You have to rely on others to help you. You gave that beautiful example, Kristen, of your neighbors chipping in, and that spiritual piece. People get so uncomfortable talking about spirituality when it comes to a professional scenario, but spiritual intelligence is really emotional intelligence, to the nth degree, and that's that gut thing. And so recognizing, like, I absolutely can't do this by myself. I absolutely have to have help. And it doesn't matter how wealthy, how powerful, how influential you are, you still have to have other people.
Yep.
Both of those ideas merge together. The consciousness and then having all the right pieces fit together really ties into our philosophy at Sustainable Mental Wellness about fostering ecosystems of wellness. And if you pause and think about the ecosystem of the earth, how all of these pieces need each other to sustain the wellness of the earth, this is the same idea. How are we bringing in those key players? How are we having this consciousness that's not just at the surface level, but underneath, and knowing that our leaders can really infuse those ideas within all of their projects, within all of their team members. And it's never a one and done. If you're trying to make these changes, it's a constant fostering or tending of your garden, essentially. You don't want pests to get in the way. You have to get rid of the pests. You have to pull the weeds. And so if you just let your garden go, then somebody's going to just take over. It's important to day by day really be building. And I like to even call that a 2-minute tweak. What's this thing I can do for 2 minutes that's going to make a small change and a small impact and positively affect that ecosystem?
And to that point, real quick, Tom, is that when you think of that ecosystem, one of the things that's missing, I think, in the upper brass is that they don't put money aside for people like us to come in and actually help implement what they say they want. So this is a classic example of wanting something they're not willing to adjust and create. And that's poor self-leadership, because you have to have that you have to have that awareness that this is needed. This is the way that the movement of our universe is going, right? People see it all the time. People are asking for it in companies. So we dabbled in it a little bit. We created wellness programs, but we didn't create this, because workshops are great, but they're not sustainable for memory. A speaker comes in, it's great, but it's fleeing. We don't have programs or people in place where we are in a company and you can reach out to this person and this is what they bring to our company. What is Amanda, what did we say on my virtual business card? The CEO of the human experience, right? So we do need a CEO of the human experience. And that's kind of the way Amanda and I explained myself, because we need that position filled. And that's not HR, by the way.
Well, we can put in a plug for our new friends at
telepathy.
Curaleaf, who are implementing just that. this idea that a human resources person, it's not appropriate in some cases. Checking in is a good idea, but if they're pre-diabetic or something, it's not appropriate for her to say, how's your diet going? And so what they provide is they come into the companies and they provide access to confidential, preventative, and they're qualified to route people where they need help, which isn't fair to expect human resources to be able to do that. Wouldn't be appropriate in many cases, but it just can't. So that's really hopeful what you're saying, and I think that what we invest in shows what we really care about. And so we're talking about investing money, time, and strategy, because you can throw money at it and you say, we care about well-being and we look at all the money we spent, but there isn't really a strategy. How are we going to get people to connect with it? So I have bad news, which is we're running out of time, and I have good news. I'm going to ask each of our guests to close with some encouragement and where there's some hope. We don't have to go far to turn on the TV and say the world's going to hell in a handbasket. We don't have to go far to get a list of all of the negativity out there. But I'm feeling hopeful just listening to you. So let's end with a little encouragement and hope. We'll start with you, Amanda.
Thank you, Tom. In my field, in psychology and mental health, I am really happy to say that I believe the stigma, the previous stigma around seeking mental health treatment is decreasing, especially among younger communities. And so it's important to recognize the commonplace capacity of younger individuals to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to go see my therapist, and it's great and it's very helpful. And so are we where we need to be? No. Can we continue to fight stigma when it comes to mental health and the services that are needed? Absolutely. And so that's the shining hope that I see, and the clarity that I continue to see, that things that we as providers have known for a very long time, that mental health is just as important as our medical health. There's hope, and there are resources, and hopefully people are recognizing that more and more.
And our hope is your passion and dedication to that, Amanda. So thank you so much. Marlo?
Yes, great question. What I was thinking about, and I was thinking about this when Kristen was finishing up her response to the last question. I was thinking about one of the greatest experiences and most learning experiences for myself was I was part of a coaching team for a school district, and there was 5 of us, and we were spread out across the whole district. We all worked together, but we each had different areas of expertise within that district. And for various reasons, over the course of 5 years that I worked with this district, they had a turnover of 3 superintendents.
Wow.
Every principal at that school in that district changed at least once, and to the high schools 3 times. And so obviously it was endemic. There were some really serious issues in there, but they had our coaching team in there. You know, they were trying, and ironically, we ended up being, we worked with the people. We asked them what they wanted to work on. We went into each school and came up with a plan and worked from there. You know, like Stephen Covey says, you start with where you want to end up. And so we worked boots on the ground. That's where we worked. We were talking to the cafeteria workers. We were talking to the bus drivers. Everybody felt part of it. Everybody felt included. And so the cool thing is that eventually things did stabilize, and the leadership that came to play at many of the schools came to us and said, you guys are doing amazing. What can we do to support you? Not all schools, but the superintendent and some of the principals came to the coaching team and said, what are you doing? And so the moral of the story to me was that you don't have to have great leadership at that level. you can start with you. You can be enough to start what you want to see.
Love it.
I love
Amen to
Kristen?
that. That is perfect.
Yeah, beautiful.
Let's see. Um, I think the key to everyone finding their upbeat path every day is obviously self-reflection and see how you feel, because how you feel matters. It really does. Gauging how you feel and how you can shift it and what's causing why you feel the way you feel, good, bad, or indifferent. I think that's huge because the more you know that, the more you can reach towards things that make you feel better, right? Meaning experiences, the things that you do, the things that you don't do. I think asking questions to yourself, who are you? Who are you not? Who do you want to become? Striving for things, less TV if it makes you feel bad. More TV sometimes if it makes you feel good, right? Like this, we're talking also about burnout. Like sometimes because you're feeling so stressed and max out, would watching TV make you feel better or worse? We have to have more self-gauge, right? The world is not going to hell in a handbag. The world is evolving. And all this chaos and all this contrast that is happening is unearthing exactly what we need to know about our human species so we can evolve. If you keep it in a perspective of everything is growth orientated and you work on you and you continue to grow you, like Amanda in the garden, the seeds you plant for yourself and those people around you will naturally conform to this community that we keep talking about where there's greater and greater peace. So that would be the hope. And the thing too is faith has seduction to it, right? So think of the seduction of faith. We're just always pulling you in. Have faith, but have faith in yourself, have faith in others, have faith in the world changing for the better. And I'll leave it with that.
It's very, very helpful. Thank
I
you
have
all
three
so much.
things.
Go ahead, Adrian.
I have three quick things.
Yes.
Because this is what I heard of as the three of you talk. This what really gives me hope and to maybe just put a fine point on it is we keep talking. So people like us keep talking, right? Because the more we talk, the more people will listen and they'll maybe start trying.
Yes.
Just try, right? Just give it a try. We have said on numerous of these episodes, probably countless, and in our writing, the power of the pause. And I think that's key, right? So that's just, right? Keep talking, pause, because you can't hear anything if you don't quiet down, right? And the third point was, Kristen, this came to me when you were talking, was perhaps we're just in the messy middle now, right? So it's not, we're going to hell in a handbasket. It feels like that right now, but actually we're just in the messy middle. And so there's light, right?
Yeah.
But we've got to finish the journey.
Our perfection is in the curation of what that looks like ultimately. It's constant. We have to unearth things that don't feel so good in order to get to the diamonds in the rough. So, yeah.
There you go. All right, Tom, now you can thank everyone.
I'm glad you put a fine point on it all. And I just thank each of you and all of you for this little community of conversation that we generated, and honored to know you and to talk with you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And ladies, thanks for being so wise in your wisdom and communication and the messages that you gave. It's really, really wonderful.
Ditto.
To be part of the group. Yeah.
Likewise, this was a very empowering group. So maybe you'll have to have us back.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We got to keep talking,
Delighted
right?
to do it. You don't get off that easy. Thank you all.
Everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.